Hello, everybody. Thanks for hanging on a couple extra minutes here. Sorry for the later start. My name is Liam Threlkill. I'm a policy analyst and program manager at the Utah League of Cities and Towns, program manager for the Local Administrative Advisor Program. This is part of the webinar series that we've been doing, providing some trainings to cities and towns across the state of Utah. The Local Administrative Advisor Program specifically focuses on cities with a population of 5,000 or less that don't have city managers or city administrators, and helps to provide them with on-the-ground assistance as well as assistance through webinars like this. Each of your associations of governments has hired either one person or multiple individuals to work on this program to assist you with any of those administrative needs that you may need. So if you have not heard of the program or you haven't used it yet, please reach out to me. Please reach out to your AOGs and see how the program can work for you. Today, we have Jamie Davidson with us, who's going to be presenting on some HR basics for smaller communities. Jamie is a longtime city manager professional. We're very lucky to have him. He spent some time in West Jordan now before he leaves us soon, but we've been excited to have him for the time that he's been here. So if you have questions for Jamie, please use the Q&A function. You can also use the chat to interact if you have some information, but as far as questions go, it's a lot easier to keep track of them if they go through the Q&A portion. So please use that. And now I'll turn the time over to Jamie.
Liam, thank you. It's great to be with all of you today, and I appreciate your attendance. It looks like we have about 30 of you online this afternoon to talk about an important topic: human resources and the influence that human resources can have in your organization. I know more often than not, human resources is a topic that oftentimes is overlooked in an organization. We spend a lot of time talking about finances and budgeting, and especially this time of year, as we look to prepare fiscal budgets, we spend a lot of time focused on finances. But really, human resources go hand in hand. As we set aside resources to do the work of our cities and towns, it is not without human resources that the work of cities and towns take place. So today, I'd like to suggest to you how human resources are really our most important resources here within our respective cities and towns. And it really is difficult to have a conversation in really 60 minutes to give you really A to Z conversation about human resources. But I'd like to introduce you to the critical purpose and the critical reason why you as administrators and elected officials in our state's cities and towns should be spending time thinking about your personnel and human resources, and how HR is one of your most important resources within your respective communities. Bottom line, people make the difference. At the core of our cities and towns, really, people make the work of your communities happen. And we ultimately hire a very diverse group of individuals who make the work of cities happen in the day-to-day. And without these trained employees, the very diverse work of our communities really does not happen. And our communities could not thrive without the individuals that you have on board doing the work on the day-to-day. So there is great value in the people that you hire. And I want to suggest to you that the value proposition in human resources can be found in a number of key areas, specifically in productivity. HR and the HR function can ensure that you have a well-trained group of individuals that are within your respective community. HR can ensure that staff are well-trained, that they're motivated, that they understand their roles and responsibilities within your organizations, that they understand the expectations that you have for them as employees within your jurisdiction. HR can play a pivotal role in building morale within your organization. They are the individuals that generally are tasked with taking care of evaluating compensation, in putting together benefit packages, and in developing opportunities for advancement where possible. They also are the individuals that are charged with legal compliance, in ensuring that you as an organization are following all the laws and regulations associated with fair labor standards, with equal employment opportunity, with the Americans with Disabilities Act, with family medical leave. All of these standards, all of these policies, all of these federal regulations that are tied to employment. Human resource professionals are generally those that are tasked with ensuring that you as an organization comply with those rules and regulations. They're also the individuals that are tasked with finding employees that are and can be an active part of your organization. So when you have specific needs to hire individuals, they're the ones who put together the process whereby you will recruit individuals to come work for your organization. And as you well know, the work of the city does not happen without qualified, competent individuals. And finally, there are also the individuals who help work through conflict, who are the individuals, if necessary, who complete investigations when there are troubles within your organization, interpersonal conflict that requires resolution. Those are the individuals. HR professionals are individuals who help you work through those challenges. So HR individuals, the HR function within your organization serves a vital role in the day-to-day operations of your community. 5 areas of support that I would suggest are critical to your success as a city or town here in the state of Utah. And I mentioned them as part of the HR value proposition within your respective organization. They are typically tasked with responsibilities associated with recruitment and onboarding. They play a role in training and development. They are charged with compensation and benefit development. They deal specifically with employee relations. And like I said, lastly, they focus on compliance. Here in the next few minutes, we're going to focus and spend some time in these 5 areas: recruitment and onboarding, training and development, compensation and benefits, employee relations, and finally, compliance. But before we head down this path, you may say to yourself, well, why are these things so critical when we as a state are what we call an at-will state? Meaning we have a situation in the state of Utah where we are an employee state where we can, for generally legal reasons, hire and fire at will, meaning provided an employer can generally hire and fire employees without really any sort of justification. So an employer can fire an employee at any time for any legal reason or no legal reason at all. And likewise, an employee can quit his or her job at any time and for any reason without facing any sort of repercussions. So if we have this kind of arrangement within the state, why do we need to worry about all of these, for example, requirements and all of these, I guess you could say, stipulations associated with human resources in the state of Utah? Well, we need to worry about these specific requirements because, as with most things in life, there are some exceptions. And in state law, and specifically in the state of Utah, there are some exceptions to this at-will situation within the state of Utah. Some of those exceptions are as follows. For example, employers within the state of Utah cannot fire somebody based on discriminatory practices. For example, you cannot fire an individual within the state based on race, religion, gender, if an individual is over the age of 40, if somebody has a particular disability. Those are characteristics that are specifically protected under federal law. And as a result, you cannot fire an employee based on those discriminatory practices. In addition, if somebody has a specific employment contract, then that at-will provision is then not applicable in that circumstance. So if somebody enters into an employment contract with you as an employee, then that at-will provision is no longer applicable. And finally, as noted on this slide, if there are other legal justifications or other laws that specifically speak to the nullification of this at-will provision, then there are additional requirements in place. And that is exactly the case with public employees generally within the state of Utah. Within Utah State Code, there are provisions that essentially provide public employees with an interest in their jobs, meaning that they cannot be fired at will. So they have particular protections in employment within the state of Utah. And we're going to talk just briefly historically about how we got to that particular position. But when I speak to that, and when I speak to those specific protections, I am referencing historically something that happened many years ago, and it happens, and it goes back all the way to the Pendleton Act of 1883. Now, President Chester Arthur is probably one of our least recognized presidents. He was actually never elected president of the United States, but rather he assumed the presidency with the assassination of President Garfield back in 1883. And he was the individual who signed into law specific protections associated with civil service reform. Now, if you understand anything associated with history, President Garfield was assassinated by an individual who was frustrated and was seeking after a political patronage appointment to government employment. And he was seeking appointment to a government job. And ultimately, he was frustrated that he wasn't receiving an appointment and thought that his path to appointment in government service would be easier if President Garfield wasn't president. And so unfortunately, he took President Garfield's life, which then led to Vice President Arthur becoming the president. And ironically, President Arthur was the individual who actually signed the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act into law. Now, what did the Pendleton Act specifically do? Well, by the 1820s, what was happening is most of the federal government was being filled, the jobs within federal government were being filled by individuals who had specific political ties to government officials. So they were being appointed not based on qualification, but rather were being appointed based on who they knew and political association. And so it led to individuals who were assuming jobs who were not qualified for those jobs. President Arthur and others, specifically Senator Pendleton, recognized that that was leading to great inefficiency in government, and ultimately that led to the passage of the Civil Service Reform Act of 1883. And as a result, that changed government hiring at the federal government level in the late 1800s. Ultimately, that law also led to changes in hiring at the state and local government level thereafter. And so as a result of that, great reforms took place in the hiring of state and local government employees at the turn of the century. And as a result, today, laws are now in place to protect government employees, and the hiring of government employees is based now primarily on qualification and not on political patronage. So there's your little history lesson as to how we got specifically to a government hiring system based on qualification rather than political patronage. So specifically in the state of Utah, public employees are generally an exception to the at-will rule. And if you look at Utah State Code 10-3-1105, what it specifically says is municipal employees have indefinite employment, meaning they can hold their positions without a set end date. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule, and those exceptions are noted below. And again, this is not a finite list, but this notes specific municipal employees that are not covered by this indefinite employment provision. Officers appointed by the mayor or other executive bodies, for example, a city manager or a city administrator. Those type of administrative officers are generally recognized as at-will employees and are not subject to Utah State Code 10-3-1105. Police and fire department members classified as civil service in a first or second class city. These are individuals who are hired in cities of 70,000+ or 100,000+ in population with established civil service commissions. Police and fire chiefs and their deputies or assistants are also part of this grouping. Department heads and their deputies. Superintendents, if you have a street superintendent or a water superintendent. Probationary employees, employees who have just been hired on and must complete a specific probationary period before they can continue on in employment. Part-time employees, seasonal employees, or any other individual appointed position under Part 9 of the law, appointed officials and their duties, including the city engineer, the city recorder, the city treasurer, or the city attorney. Those individuals are subject to the at-will rule as part of their employment. Now, does that mean that all employees that are hired by a city or town can never be terminated for cause or can never be eliminated based on, for example, a need to have a reduction in force or a layoff? The specific answer is no. There are provisions within state law that allow governing bodies the opportunity to create criteria whereby employees can be terminated for cause. So a governing body may actually determine a framework whereby they can determine what is reason for cause, what would be justification to terminate an employee for specific reasons: failure to perform, failure to abide by specific city policies, failure to abide by law, for example. All of these type of expectations are not unreasonable, and provided they are outlined would be absolute justification to terminate an employee and to essentially define cause and a reason to terminate an employee. And specifically in state law, there are procedures that allow you, one, to identify cause, an ability to terminate an employee, and in turn, there is a provision within the law that allows an employee to appeal that termination. So an employee is permitted to have a hearing, essentially a due process course where he or she could appeal that termination. So everything within state law is structured in a way where you as a governing body has the opportunity to make changes as appropriate to define cause and to terminate an employee where necessary, but at the same time, it allows an employee to appeal that termination if he or she feels like they were unjustly terminated. And you have an opportunity as a governing body to create that process whereby an employee could appeal that process. So let's just talk briefly about these areas of support, these areas where you probably are going to spend most of your time as a governing body, as an organization working as related to human resources. The first area where you're going to spend time is really recruiting and onboarding employees. So I want to spend a few minutes and just talk about, well, okay, how do we start a recruitment within our organization? What would be some of the key things that an HR professional would do if they were to hire an employee? Well, it really begins with an employment application and putting together an employment application. Now, some organizations may already have an employment application put together. Some organizations may not have an application put together. In the event you don't have an application put together, I would recommend that you use the application that is on the screen right now. This is the State of Utah's Department of Workforce Service employment application. This is a generic application, job application. And it is something that you could easily essentially remove the State of Utah's logo and name and easily replace your organization's logo and name and use it for your specific purpose. And I've included a web address where you can access this specific document for your benefit if you would like to do so. And you can use it as a template. And the reason that I like this document is it includes all of the basic information that I think you're going to need as a hiring agency if you were to look and evaluate a potential applicant for employment within your respective organization. I would encourage you to have applicants fill out a job application rather than fill out a resume or just simply submit a resume. Individuals are encouraged to include a resume with an application, but oftentimes resumes are incomplete and don't always include all the information that you are looking for with an applicant. So I would always encourage you to have applicants complete an application and submit a resume as a supplemental piece of any sort of application. In addition to that, I would always encourage you to make your application process as easy as possible. And more often than not these days, that includes building some sort of online tool that individuals can access rather than coming into your office, for example, and filling out an application with pen and paper. Making something easily accessible online is always encouraged and makes it easier for applicants to go through the hiring process or the application process. And you know, these tools and resources are available online. You have peer cities that I'm sure are willing or would be more than willing to share their resources and make them available to you as well if you have a need to benefit from these type of resources. But do what you can to make them available online to the degree possible. Every job requires a job description. If you're looking to hire an individual, you probably need to start with the preparation of a job description. A job description clearly identifies the specific job being advertised. It notes the position's purpose, reporting relationships, what specific tasks the job includes, reporting relationships, what kind of skills are required to complete the job, what kind of experiences necessary in doing the jobs, if specific certifications are required as part of the job, if there are physical demands required for the job. It outlines all the expectations of a position and should be put together every time you are advertising for a specific job, so that whoever is applying for the job has a clear understanding and expectation for what he or she is applying to do. Now, you may say, but I've never done something like this. I'm quite confident there are sister communities in and around you who may be able to provide you with a copy of a job description of a job very similar to the one that you are looking to advertise and recruit for. So you can look to them as a resource to help you in developing a job application. I would also suggest or maybe encourage you to look at artificial intelligence tools in helping you put together a job description for some of the positions that you are looking to recruit. I've included online here just a simple job description for a public works laborer. This is a job description that I put together using ChatGPT. So I just went online, used the AI tool ChatGPT, told them I'm looking to put together a job description for a entry-level public works position, and this is what it provided to me. And frankly, I think it is a pretty comprehensive entry-level job description for a public works laborer position. So it's probably not specific to everything that you may be looking to do or your organization may need of a public works laborer, but it serves as a good start for you in putting together a job description. After you put together a job description, after you are have put together a application, you are going to want to advertise the position. In advertising a position, you can use conventional sources. You can advertise in the newspaper. You can post the position on a job board within your city hall or at your local library or in your local newspaper. I would suggest to you that things are a little more advanced than that these days. A lot of job applicants and those searching for employment are looking at online tools and resources when it comes to job searches. So I would encourage you to consider who your audience is as it relates to who you are looking to hire. Are you looking for prospective applicants who are recent college graduates? Are they mid-career? Are they local? Are they looking for part-time work? Different recruitments may require different resources. So I would always encourage you to take advantage of the resources available at the Utah League of Cities and Towns. They have a wonderful job bank that is available for you to post all of your vacant job listings. And I've included here on the screen a printout or a screenshot of the Utah League's job bank. This is just one of the pages that show all of the recent job listings on ulct.org. You can also use resources like Indeed or LinkedIn, both very prevalent and I guess you could say, well-viewed resources that are online, good job tools online. There are also career resources at college campuses. I've included two of them, careers.byu.edu or www.uvu.edu, career-internship. These are just two examples of online resources that you can access that are also great resources in advertising jobs. The purpose in this slide is simply to suggest that you consider who you are looking to hire and target those advertisements in a way where you are going to reach the right audience when it comes to advertising for a job. The next thing, after you advertise the job, you're going to obviously receive a number of applicants. And that process, that effort of screening applicants is going to require some time. And the suggestion that I would make to you is that you create a standardized review process to ensure that all applicants are evaluated fairly and consistently based on meeting minimum criteria as established by the job description that you've prepared. So a minimum set of qualifications that may include education, years of experience, required certifications, software proficiency, supervisory experience, and you may even want to include some sort of practical test. It may be a type test. It may be an ability to use a certain type of software. In the cases of public safety, there may be some sort of physical agility testing that is tied to an applicant screening effort. After you screen those applicants for minimum qualifications, then you have the opportunity to interview candidates. Again, the key in interviewing and screening applicants is consistency, creating a process where you run and screen applicants through a process that evaluates them using a consistent set of criteria, where you ask the same questions of each candidate, or you run each candidate or screen candidates through the same types or the same criteria. Moreover, I would encourage that you ask questions that are situational questions rather than yes/no questions. And I've included 10 common interview questions as part of this particular slide. They're not yes/no questions, but they are questions that elicit feedback from candidates that require them to share experience that they have, to share more about who they are, what their work experience is, some of the reasons that they want to work with you and for you, and provide examples of their experience that would suggest to you why they wouldn't be a good candidate for the position that you are hiring for. Just a caution as it relates to interviewing candidates. I would encourage you to steer clear of personal type questions that focus on family, health, any sort of protected status type questions, disabilities, race, religion, sexual orientation. All of those type questions are protected questions under federal law, and those type of conversational type questions could be deemed as discriminatory and could result in allegations of discrimination in the course of an interview process. So you've gone through the recruitment and the interview process, you've screened the candidates, you've found the candidate that you are looking to hire, and you want to extend a job offer. I would always encourage you to extend a job offer and to do so in writing. And it's always best to extend a job offer in writing after you have completed a reference background check. The written offer should include the position title, proposed start date, the proposed salary or wage that you're looking to extend to the candidate, any benefits that are tied to the position, and any other relevant terms or conditions of employment. You may, for example, be looking to start the employee off with a number of hours of paid vacation, for example, upon hire, or there may be some other benefits that are tied to the position that you want to make the employee aware of, or the future employee aware of. Allow the candidate some time to consider the job offer, and also be prepared to counter or to extend an additional offer if the potential candidate responds with a counter offer. And then finally, always finalize the offer or counter offer with a written acceptance by way of signature, so that you can consummate the offer with in writing in the same way you began the process in writing. So that's the recruitment and hiring process. The next thing that I wanted to just touch on is training and development. Now, why is training and development important? Oftentimes, when organizations face budget crunches, training and development is unfortunately one of the first things that get cut. I would encourage you to avoid that temptation of cutting training and development. That is oftentimes a short-term decision that many organizations regret. And why do they regret it? Because training and development is what helps our employees grow. It helps them develop new skills. It provides to them opportunities to expand their skill set and to make them more valuable, more productive employees for you and the organization that they serve. And it provides to them the message that they are important and that you as an organization are willing and wanting to invest in them. And when you don't make those training opportunities available to them, then unfortunately they sometimes want to look elsewhere. And then that puts you at a distinct disadvantage in the future when, for example, they decide to leave and you have to replace them. In addition, it enhances loyalty and leads, I think, to better retention. If they think and know that you are willing to invest in them, then they are more apt to stay and want to continue to invest in the organization. I think training and development also is something that allows you as individuals to identify future leaders. The leaders that you have in your organization today are not always going to be your leaders. They're going to retire. They're going to move on. Unfortunately, some of them are going to need to step away from the organization in the future for reasons outside of your control, and you're going to need to replace them. Often by way of training and development, you can identify who those future leaders are going to be. And so that succession planning can take place by way of the training and development opportunities that you put in place today for the benefit of them and you into the future. And finally, training and development is so critical as it relates to risk management in terms of enhancing safety and making sure that the workplace is a place that is safe, that is free from injury and workplace danger. I wrote here, a trained workforce is a safe workforce. So the better trained an employee workforce is, the less apt a workforce is going to be to find themselves making workplace errors and skirting around safety practices, wanting to cut corners, and wanting to do things that are outside policy and procedure. I recognize that training and development is sometimes an expensive part of any organization. As a result, that is why I suggest that sometimes coming together as communities in and around, for example, you as an organization is sometimes a good way to economize. If you can collectively come together and work on training together, that is sometimes a way where you can better manage costs and do things in a more efficient and effective way. Let's talk about compensation and benefits for a minute. While compensation and benefits is not necessarily the only reason that employees stay within an organization, I think we all need to admit that it is one of the primary things we need to focus on as an organization in terms of employee retention and employee hiring. So while it is not at the top of every employee's list, it is always something that employees look to in terms of decisions as to whether or not the organization they are with is an organization they want to be with today, tomorrow, and into the future. Employees want to be compensated fairly. They are not always looking to be the best paid, but they are wanting to be compensated fairly. One of the best ways to compensate employees fairly is to do what we can to put together a competitive wage and benefit package that will essentially attract and retain skilled employees. So how do we do that? How do we essentially ensure that what we are putting on the table for our employees is competitive? One of the best ways that we do that is we put together a salary structure and a classification system that is market-based, that is essentially a system that provides like pay for like work as related to our peers. And we do that by way of comparing our pay to the pay of our peers. Now, I've included here a compensation survey analysis from a particular survey company that does business here in Utah. I am not one to specifically encourage and suggest everybody use a particular vendor. However, this particular resource, and I've included a link to this resource on the slide, is a very cost beneficial resource for all agencies within the state of Utah. So for example, this resource, it's called TechnologyNet, is a compensation and benefits salary survey tool available to all agencies in the state of Utah for $200 a year for agencies with less than 30 employees. So it's an incredible bargain for all agencies within the state and can provide you with a wealth of information that can ensure that you are looking at your compensation and comparing your compensation with other agencies to make sure that you're competitive. Once you do that, then you can take a look at, and you're looking at external competition, then you can look at internal fairness, and you can compare positions within your organization internally, and you can compare like positions within your internal organization to make sure that like positions within the organization that have consistent or similar risk requirements, budget requirements, similar supervisory requirements, similar budget authority, decision-making authority, are all classified or grouped together so that they are compensated in a, I guess you could say, like manner within the organization. So from a compensation perspective, you're looking at external and internal compensation fairness. From a benefits perspective, you want to look at an array of benefits. There are some required mandatory benefits. For example, participation in the Utah State Retirement System is a mandatory benefit that we are required to provide all public employees. But there are other benefits that are available that you can provide your employees. And those benefits can be the difference between one employee choosing one employer versus another employer. And some of those I've identified here on this slide. Everything from deferred compensation matches, 401 or 457 programs, to supplemental insurance programs, to even transit passes or retiree benefits. Another benefit that more and more employers are offering these days are flexible work and leave offerings. More and more employees are breaking away from traditional work schedules, the traditional Monday through Friday work schedules, and are offering modified work schedules. Some of those work schedules involve work from home relationships. Some of them are also offering what we call paid time off programs, rather than traditional sick leave versus vacation leave type programs. They're also offering arrangements that allow you to, for example, start later in the day and finish work later in the evening, rather than a standard 8 to 5 schedule. All of these flexible type work offerings are things that are not necessarily traditional benefits, but are becoming more and more important in today's workplace. I've just included a couple of pictures within our organization, the City of West Jordan. I recognize that your bandwidth may be different than the bandwidth we have in our organization today, but what you have here are two pictures, or a couple of pictures. One of them is the picture of a health clinic that we as a city have set up here in City Hall. We actually have a clinic, and we have made that clinic available to our employees, where if an employee has a particular health issue, we have a nurse practitioner who is on site available to visit with our employees. And in addition, we have some wellness facilities that are available to our employees, where if we have employees that are riding their bicycles to work, we have a indoor bike storage facility where our employees can take advantage of those facilities, where they can park their bikes inside our building in safety, and they don't need to worry about leaving their bikes parked outside the building. Those are just kind of atypical benefits that we provide our employees. You may be inclined to do something different that resonate with your employees, that are things that would speak to your employees and would serve as a benefit or incentive to have them want to work with you and stay with you rather than go somewhere different. I've also included some other kind of recognition and reward type programs. The idea of rewarding employees for going above and beyond by providing them gift certificates or providing them with swag or other type of rewards for a job well done. I know of other organizations that the mayor and city council will provide their employees with movie tickets and a birthday card every year when it's their employee's birthday, as just a thank you of recognition of who they are. And we appreciate the fact that you are working in the organization. Employee relations is another big part of managing the human resource function in any organization. And it's really not a hard skill. It really is an art. I've underlined the word art in this slide because human resources is really trying to facilitate interactions between employee and employee, employee and supervisor, employee and the public. And oftentimes they're trying to resolve conflict. They're trying to improve productivity. They're trying to provide feedback and coach in a way that will help an employee work towards achieving goals and accomplishing and reaching outcomes that are important to the organization. I've included here on this slide an employee coaching form that could be used in a circumstance where you may have a supervisor that's working with a specific employee and they may wish to document specific conversations that they're having with an employee about improving a particular situation within the organization or within a particular work group. Of course, performance evaluations are a big part of every organization. And not every organization has a performance evaluation form. I've included an employee performance evaluation form here on the screen. This is kind of a standard employee evaluation form here. And it is generally a process that is completed on an annual basis. And it really serves to document the supervisor-employee relationship. And it documents recommendations for what an employee is doing well, what an employee could improve upon. It allows a supervisor and an employee to set goals for the future and to highlight what has been accomplished in the past year. And it may be an opportunity for you as a supervisor and a manager to identify areas of improvement in the future. This is a simple form. If you as an organization don't have an employee evaluation form that you have in place already, you can use a simple form like this. It's available online. There's also other resources that are available from software companies, national HR management software companies that have free versions of their appraisal software that are available to small organizations like yourself. And you may want to try these software tools. Organizations like Bamboo HR or Performance Pro. These are organizations who have resources that are available for you to try out and test. Liam, is there a question?
We do. We have a quick one here. The question says, isn't there a limit on the amount of money spent on incentive programs? I thought $50. Is this true?
No. You as an organization can budget within your organization. You can have a set aside in your budget for those type of programs. The $50 limit is tied to an external vendor or an external party having a relationship or a incentive with one of your employees. so that the concern is related more to the external relationship with your employee rather than the internal relationship that you have with your employee.
Awesome.
Of course, progressive discipline is another important piece of employee relations. And this relates to, like we were talking about, if an employee has particular challenges and there is a reason to terminate an employee for cause, it is necessary to document the reasons behind the need to discipline an employee. And a human resource professional can help you work through that process and create that structure necessary to, for example, terminate an employee for cause. Here I've outlined the particular steps that an organization can take to discipline an employee, leading all the way up to, if necessary, terminating an employee. Now, progressive discipline is intended to be consistent and fair and focused on helping an employee, not necessarily just terminating an employee. So if you have an employee who has a particular problem, we shouldn't necessarily look to just, well, if we have a problem, we're just going to terminate the employee. The hope would be that we could address the problem, change the employee's behavior, and move forward, rather than identify the problem and immediately terminate the employee. Progressive discipline is a means whereby we can hopefully course correct and change the employee's conduct and return the employee to full performance, and do it in a way where we can productively both move forward in a positive way. Finally, HR professionals and HR can be very, very helpful when it comes to compliance. And there are a variety of compliance needs that organizations have as related to human resources. There is legal compliance, and legal compliance relates specifically with a lot of labor laws that are at the federal and state level. Everything from minimum wage laws to overtime and compensatory time requirements, as noted by the Fair Labor Standards Act. There are workplace safety practices. There are anti-discrimination laws. There are protections under the Civil Rights Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. All of these laws have requirements that need to be followed and enforced. There's regulatory compliance requirements. All of these compliance issues are also tied generally to federal guidelines, Internal Revenue Service guidelines, OSHA guidelines, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission guidelines. And then, of course, there are policy compliance guidelines, ensuring that the policies that your organization has adopted relative to, for example, hiring practices or hours worked practices or employee discipline practices, all of those practices are consistent with state law and federal law. So all of those compliance requirements must be met, and it is always helpful that you have the assistance of a human resource professional. In addition to that, as organizations, you have documentation and record keeping requirements. Cities and towns are required to keep accurate human resource and payroll records, everything from personnel files to benefit enrollment forms to training and certification logs to performance evaluations, disciplinary actions, and everything to employment eligibility verification forms. Even the fact that an employee has the right to work in the United States, there is a form that must be filled out and kept. Failure to do that can result in penalties. Training and education forms. It's best practice for organizations to train their employees on things like sexual harassment, data privacy, ethical conduct, accident reporting procedures, fraud and whistleblowing practices. All of these things should be trained on at least annually. Now, many of these things can be essentially provided to employees by way of an employee handbook on an annual basis. But then, of course, you have the responsibility of putting an employee handbook together on an annual basis and keeping that employee handbook up to date on an annual basis. And then finally, there's going to be a need on occasion to conduct audits and investigations. Unfortunately, on occasion, you're going to have employees who are going to approach you and are going to suggest to you that they have been the victim of, for example, sexual harassment, or they have experienced some sort of impropriety within the organization, and they are going to ask for your help in resolving the matter, or they're going to ask that you investigate the matter. Those type of responsibilities are things that can be best facilitated with the help of a human resource professional. I put in bold at the bottom of this slide, paying attention to compliance matters in any city or town is critical in mitigating legal risks, maintaining the confidence of employees, and upholding public trust. Okay, so in the last hour, I've given you a lot to think about. So you may be asking yourself, okay, well, how do I get started? What do I do? Well, I'm going to share with you the feedback that my wife shares with me quite frequently. And that is Roma uno die non est condita. Rome wasn't built in a day. Just focus on one area and build from there. Perhaps what I've shared with you, something today has resonated with you. I would encourage you to kind of begin there and say, okay, today I'm going to start working on this particular HR need. And then build from there. Maybe next week or next month, start with something and build on that, start with something else, and then go from there, and then something more and more and more. The ideal would be to hire a human resource professional in your city or town where possible. Now, I recognize that resources are limited, and so that may not be a possibility right now. So in the event it's not a possibility, then consider dedicating some time of a current employee to human resource responsibilities. But I do that also with the caveat that this is not necessarily an ideal situation, with the understanding that human resources can be kind of an all-encompassing responsibility. Now, I say that having been a city manager, but also having been a human resource director of a large organization with many responsibilities that sometimes it felt like I was busier as a human resource director than I was as a city manager. So I would add the caution that you don't simply add this assignment to an employee's already busy plate, but if you are going to do that, make sure that that individual has some training, that they have the aptitude to do the work, and give them the opportunity to succeed by providing them with resources and training to help them and to make them feel comfortable that they can succeed in that kind of situation. And finally, I would just encourage you to take advantage of the resources that are available to you through the ULCT Local Administrative Advisor Program. The league has set up this program in a way where you have a resource that is available to help answer some of these questions. So don't hesitate to reach out. There are people who want to help you, and who can make human resource maybe less of a struggle going forward. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. If you have questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, Liam, or any of the LAAs that are throughout the state. And I appreciate your time. And if there are additional questions, I'm more than happy to take them. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much, Jamie. That was really fantastic. We're a few minutes over. We've got a couple questions in here. One comment, one question, I guess. From David Kitchen. Oh, he put it in the chat there as well. He said, the Utah Chapter of Public Sector HR Association is another organization focused on helping public agencies with HR functions. They have about 100 members from across the state, and then he put their website in there as well. So that's a great resource,
Excellent.
David.
Excellent.
And then we had one question here. It says, what incentives do Utah employers receive when they hire protected job applicants, vets, age 50 plus disabled, etc., as a means of combating discrimination and bias in the hiring process? In other words, what's in it for employers?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question. That is perhaps a good question to take up with somebody like David Kitchen's organization, where they may be able to provide some specific feedback relative to specific advantages. There may be financial incentives that they could benefit from through programs that are offered by organizations that may be able to offset the cost of some of these hires or some of the training associated with hiring individuals who fit into some of those categories. For example, retraining dollars or other programs like that.
Awesome. Great. Well, that was the last question. I'll just encourage again, as Jamie said, if you have questions, his information is there. We'll put the slides online as well. This will be posted in the next day or two. And my email, I just put in the chat as well. If you have any questions about the program, if you need any assistance, training, or finding resources or otherwise, please let me know and I'll do my best to get you connected where I can. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Thanks, Jamie, and we will see you next time. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.